What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chicago Bears Huddle podcast. I'm Darren Doxey, staff writer for Chicago Bears Huddle.
And I'm Ryan Wooden, the featured columnist for Chicago Bears Huddle.
Well, we find ourselves after the second preseason game now, and overall, the Bears got the win. It seemed the offense worked a little bit better. They kind of got things going a little bit. There's still the turnover thing where Cutler's forcing the ball to Marshall. I'm not too worried about that. That's a whole nother topic. But overall, I think there was more positives than negatives coming out of this game with the rookies that were on display on the right side of the line, plus the John Bostic stuff, continuing to play good. Still a little lost in coverage, but overall, Corey Wooten showed that he looks like he's healthy again in preseason. So he's coming out of the gate roaring. I think he's due for a big-time breakout season. Forte looks primed up and ready to go after that. There's not too many negatives you can take out of that game overall, at least with the starters. That was my impression of it. I think that it was a good experience for the second preseason game. I saw some things I wanted to see overall.
No, absolutely. That first drive, another kind of just what is it with the Bears in the first drives? But they come out there and obviously they look sluggish, 3 straight plays for negative yardage. But they came out in that second drive and they did actually look more composed. They looked more comfortable, and that was really the first glimpse of what we've seen this offense look like when it's kind of clicking on all cylinders. They had the big run by Matt Forte. Jay Cutler was accurate, that back shoulder throw to Brandon Marshall. That's one of those things that you kind of expect those two to have. Big-bodied guy down in the red zone.
Uncoverable.
Exactly. And then Jay Cutler can throw him open to give him that back shoulder seam and give him some space to make the catch. I mean, that was pretty much what you come to expect from Jay Cutler and Brandon Marshall at this point. There was definitely a lot of positives I saw with that second drive offensively, things that you can build on going forward, which is certainly what you're looking for from a second preseason game. One thing that definitely stood out for me on that drive that maybe goes a little bit unmentioned, how about seeing Jermon Bushrod get out there on the quick
Yes.
pitch? Out there, get out to a corner and put him out of the way and spring that huge run for Matt Forte. That was nice to see. Obviously, you invest that sort of money in a left tackle and expect him to be a Pro Bowl caliber player. To see him out there on the edge, getting into the action a little bit, that was awesome to see. You mentioned the right side of the line, which is certainly something that I had a very close eye on. Kyle Long was dominant. Jordan Mills was very good. And to see that out of 2 rookies, their first time playing next to each other was super, super encouraging. Obviously, we talked a lot last week about what the defense did, but forcing 4 more turnovers, special teams, they were dynamic.
It's a Lovie Smith hangover.
There really was. And you know what? One of the interesting things I thought that towards the end of that football game, sitting there lost, is one of those insights that Trent Dilford had talking to Lance Briggs and Charles Tillman during their production meeting, and them talking about the offensive mindset that they take when they get the football. They know immediately what sort of angles they want to take to kind of immediately turn themselves into offensive football players. And that's a holdover thing from the Lovie Smith era.
From Mike Brown, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
At least the running after the turnover. Charles Tillman credited him for that last year, and Lawrence Holmes on the score had Mike Brown on and talked about that. Mike Brown said, you just got to follow. You have to turn an offensive player and follow your blocks. Get downfield, make a cut, go.
I did an interview with Brandon Harden last year, not for the story that I did with him this year, but he was talking about just kind of learning how to play safety and kind of getting used to playing in the cover 2 and playing in a Lovie Smith defense. And he said one of the first days that he walked into meeting rooms, Lovie Smith was in there kind of talking to some of the rookies and stuff. And Lovie asked Brandon Harden specifically, what is your biggest goal on every single play? And Brandon Harden said to stop the ball carrier, to stop the ball, to make sure that the opposing offense gets nothing. He goes, no, our goal on every single play is to score. Whether it's offense, defense, our goal on every single play is to score. And that doesn't happen every single time, but that is our goal on every single play is to score.
And no one's done it better than the Bears.
No, and they haven't. And that's the thing that the Bears, you expect, even without Lovie Smith there, there's still a lot of holdover from that defense last year. People who played under Lovie Smith over the course of the last, whether it's just 2 years or whether it's 7 or 8 or 9 years, like Charles Tillman and Lance Briggs, those are guys who have played for Lovie Smith for a long time. The principles that Lovie Smith instilled upon them aren't things that you expect them to lose overnight. So I do expect this to be a defense that still creates a ton of turnovers.
And that's one of those things that, looking at the franchise right now, if you look at different eras, you see the carryover from the 80s defenses. I mean, granted, you can't play football like that anymore because then you get fined and ejected from the league. But some of the same theories and the same styles, you're going to see that with the Lovie Smith era. As these Tillman and Briggs, they still got a year or two left. They're still going to be around. The rookies that are coming in are going to get taught that. The other guys now I guess they're veterans. Conti and Major Wright are going to come in, preach that to the rookies. It's going to be one of those things that's going to kind of be a mainstay in the Chicago Bears franchise style of defense. It's the Lovie Smith imprint, in my opinion, is here to stay. It's going to have one of those things at least for a long time. I called it in my column on Friday. I called it the Lovie Smith hangover. They're just picking up right where they left off. I don't think they're going to be as good as the defense this year, but I think the turnovers are still going to be there. So it will all work out and come back around. But
give Mel Tucker credit because he came in here
great.
and said coming out of the gates, he's like, you know what, there's not a lot wrong with this defense.
Nope.
And these guys are comfortable in that type of a system. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to implement some of my own things, some of my own wrinkles, but for the most part, these guys know what they're doing out there. There's really not much of a reason for me to come out here and tweak things and alter things. No, we're not going to run as much zone, but we're still going to run a lot of zone. Yes, we're going to run, like I said, a few more wrinkles in terms of blitzes, zone blitz action, just a little bit more man coverage on the outside from time to time when they decide they want to bring pressure. But for the most part, he said, you know what, this isn't broken. There's no reason for me to come in here and try to fix it.
And he's exactly right. I mean, especially with basically the entire defense is returning basically except for two linebackers. So overall, I mean, this defense is in such good shape going into the season. They're the same. Mel Tucker really has impressed me, and so is Aaron Cromer overall too. From everything he said and just done, I'm impressed with the new coaching staff completely. Trestman still, I don't really understand anything he says. It's really odd and very weird, but I like him so far. But I backtrack a little bit. You mentioned Kyle Long, and I can't not talk about him right away. I mean, the entire Kyle Long experience has been such a nice surprise. I mean, I'm just going to get straight into his technique. His base is so solid on every level for a rookie who missed OTAs and minicamp. His fundamentals are there. He's got that. He's driving guys from the. I remember he drove some guy, I think, from the 17 or 18 yard line into the end zone. He's an absolute pancake blocker, and that's nice to see because we haven't had someone with a mean streak since Olin Kreutz, and Olin wasn't very good the last couple of years he was here. I mean, he never loses his base. His ability, his leverage is just it's perfect. For a rookie offensive lineman, I can't ask for more. Granted, it's one game, and I'm trying not to go crazy over it, but the technique he displayed is really. It's promising, big time, going into the season. He's a bad dude.
Dilfer said at the end of that game that was one of the best performances from a rookie guard that he's seen in a long time. I don't know how often he's watching rookie guards, but I know I'm certainly not watching a lot of rookie guards.
Me either. For me, it was one of the best.
The second week of preseason, but it is the best that I've seen from what I can certainly remember. I mean, he was absolutely fantastic, and obviously it's a preseason game. There's only a certain amount of stock that you can put in that, but there's characteristics that you see there. And one of the things like we've talked about for the last 2 weeks that we've done the show, a lot of people worried about the amount of football experience he comes in. He doesn't look like an inexperienced football player. He's got solid fundamental. You mentioned his base. I mean, he's just a very game-ready looking guard for a rookie, and that's something that you really kind of maybe were tentative about coming into the season, but I think after watching that performance on Thursday night, I feel a lot more comfortable saying, all right, that's my starter at right guard for the foreseeable future, and I'm okay with that because that's going to be a pretty damn good football player.
And, I was curious to see if he was going to be overmatched. I mean, granted, that team's not the greatest team in the world, but overall, I was one thing I was looking for. I was like, is Kyle Long going to be overmatched in his first game in his first year? And he was the one who was overmatching everybody. I mean, he was just bossing people around like it's like he owns the place.
That pull
I mean,
on the trap, that trap block,
God,
just absolutely destroyed. I mean, granted, the guy kind of slipped and fell as he was coming into it, but he was going down regardless. Kyle Long got the inside beat on him and was going to absolutely decleat that guy had he not tripped and fallen. He kind of got lucky for himself that he was able to duck
Agreed.
it.
He avoided that highlight reel right there.
Otherwise, he would have been that would have been one of those things that made the people go ooh and ah on the film.
It would have been like the Lance Lewis block or not the block, the Lance Lewis tackle on steroids.
Yeah. Exactly.
That was an impressive feat for such a big man. But I mean, this guy is for a rookie, a Bears first round offensive line rookie coming in and honestly, outside of maybe Bushrod, looking better than everybody on the line. And he was comfortable. He never looked nervous. Granted, it's preseason. We'll see. You know what? And he's going to make some mental mistakes. It's just going to happen because that's where the missing OTAs, at least in my opinion, where missing OTAs and minicamp is going to kind of affect him a little bit, at least the first half of the season. I think we're going to see some mental errors. But you have to be optimistic about what you've seen. And then Jordan Mills looked just as comfortable and just as good technique, and he was really a project offensive lineman coming out of college, according to most scouts.
Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong with the way those two guys played on the right side. Obviously, Kyle Long is a guy that you look at as like a franchise-type offensive lineman. Anytime you invest a first-round pick, that's pretty much what you're saying about somebody. When it comes to Jordan Mills, I mean, you're just talking about immediate value off the bat right there. You're spending a fifth-round draft pick and now getting a potential starter at right tackle to where you feel like he's an upgrade over a below average to serviceable offensive lineman. If you think that Jordan Mills is better than Jamarcus Webb out of the gate, obviously there's a certain amount of value you're getting out of him if he's a fifth-round pick, and you do feel that comfortable with him. But certainly the way those two guys played on the right side is promising going towards the future. If you're going to have those two guys as your starters, you expect there to be a certain amount of discord there, a certain amount of just general immaturity, but at the same time, if you're getting two guys who give you hope towards the future and are still capable, solid NFL players on the right side of your offensive line at this point of the game, you're in pretty good shape on the offensive line.
And I was listening to the score, and Hub Arkish had come on and was talking about Jordan Mills, and he was saying, they graded him out to be, a long-term project, someone with some potential. But I personally had no expectation. I think, didn't you mention Mills on our draft show? I
thought legitimately that depending on how he looked in camp, and obviously that's a pretty wide statement.
It's crazy prediction.
There's not a lot of narrowness in there, but I mean, I thought that he would have an opportunity to potentially push Jamarcus Webb at the right tackle spot if he was really kind of willing to come in during camp and put the work in and just put that extra effort in. And obviously he's done enough to turn the coaching staff's head to get him to a place where he's being plugged in there as a starter at right tackle. And I mean, it looks like it's his job going forward.
And I think it was his job immediately after that game, him and Kyle's, unless they just butcher the third preseason game, which I don't think that's going to happen. But after what Jay Cutler said at the end of the game, he said something along the lines of, I'm at ease with those guys on the right side. And then Forte came out yesterday or today, it was one of the two, and he said something positive about that. He likes the right side of the line now. So I mean, I think they're pretty much cemented in going into the season, bearing an injury or just a total collapse. Which I even think if there's a collapse, they still might get it, because Jamarcus Webb was against a bunch of bums. I mean, come on, let's be real. Yeah. He's not getting that job back. They restructured his contract, so that's he's pretty much half out the door. It's just a matter of Jonathan Scott getting healthy, but. Overall, that's an impressive performance from people I didn't really expect, and I can't complain one bit about it. On offense, I'm just going to cut to the Jay Cutler thing that I mentioned him. Everyone's going, oh, he throws to Marshall too much. I think he does throw to Marshall too much, but is that a problem unless he's throwing picks after picks, which he is a pick machine. He's got 100 picks in 90-something games. So, of course, he's a pick machine, but part of me thinks that that's just who he is. He's going to make those terrible. He's got Favre syndrome. That's bottom line. That's what he has.
There's going to be instances where he makes bad throws in the coverage and it winds up coming back to hurt you. Mm-hmm. And obviously, a big goal of Mark Trestman's is to cut down on the number of those instances. But I don't actually look at that interception that happened. And yes, it did happen because he was focused almost exclusively on Brandon Marshall. But another reason that why it happened, and Mark Trestman gave coverage. A really interesting – I'm
saying it was blanket coverage too. I mean, Mark – I know. Yeah, continue.
He gave an interesting explanation because basically what had happened is the receiver on the backside of that play, on the same side as the post, but that was supposed to sit there and isolate the safety, he was supposed to run a hitch and kind of force the safety to suck up into coverage against him, and in which case it would have been Brandon Marshall running one-on-one down the middle of the field. And the whole idea of the scheme of that play is for them just to create a one-on-one and throw the ball up there and let Brandon Marshall make a play, because that's a play that you're comfortable with him making. If it's Brandon Marshall against somebody, and I really don't give a damn who it is, you're going to count on Brandon Marshall to make that play the vast majority of the time. And the fact that the guy on the backside did not run the hitch or did not run the isolating route that he was supposed to kind of suck the safety away from the middle of the field was a major factor. And so they were able to have coverage over the top and underneath, and it just kind of gave Jay nowhere to put that football. Had the route been run right, there would have been a one-on-one opportunity there. Granted, that ball was still dramatically underthrown. It might have still been an interception, but it would have been an interception you looked at and said, oh, hey, he saw Brandon Marshall running one-on-one. I get what he was doing there.
Yeah, I agree. And Mark Trestman, that was the play Mark Trestman said that they had never really run. It was still kind of a new play, I believe, too. So I haven't overreacted, and really no one has overreacted, at least on my Twitter universe, which isn't very big at all. But no one's really interacted in that, or overreacted in that realm of people. So that's a good thing moving forward. But I'm still not concerned about the offense. I know it's going to struggle for a while, and it's going to be kind of inconsistent. But the line looks absolutely, for a Bears line, it's great. And Forte looks ready to roll. So I think come the season, if they can get Forte going, this offense is going to be it's going to come so much easier. That's a gimme explanation or prediction, I guess. But I'm impressed with the two rookies. I guess we'll stick with the rookie topics here and go to the John Bostic stuff all over the news today. Making more plays in that game. They force him inside. He hits the guy. I knew it was going to be a fine, even though it shouldn't have been. I figured that was coming. I didn't think it would be $21,000 for a guy who doesn't make that much money at all.
The size of the fine is absolutely astronomical, and it's easy for people out there in podcast land listening to us right
now. These guys make money.
Reading it, yeah. Talking about rich guys who just they make too much money. $21,000 is no big deal to them. I kind of put it this way in my column just to kind of put some context on it. $21,000 is 5% of what John Bostic's base salary is. That's the equivalent of, let's say, someone like me struggling, right? Or let's say I made $20,000 last year. That's like getting a $1,000 speeding ticket.
Yeah.
Anyone who lives paycheck to paycheck knows $1,000 is an unexpected expense is a damn lot of money. So $21,000 is an unexpected expense coming out of his first game check, mind you, which is going to be like $25,000, a little over $25,000 in change. That's 80% of what his first week's pay is supposed to be in the National Football League. That is absolutely insane. And you know what? He'll be fine in the long haul financially. I'm not really.
And he got a
about
signing
John
bonus,
Bostic.
so he's kind of okay. But
I'm
still,
not worried about John Bostic's finances, but at the same time, that's a punch in the gut. And Matt Bowen was actually talking on Twitter about it. He's like, I got a $7,500 fine in my first preseason game as a rookie, and when I got that FedEx package in the mail, I literally wanted to throw up. That's like, you see that amount of money, and even though you're making a certain amount of money, you see that on a slip of paper that says that you owe this to the National Football League, and it doesn't register in your head that you have the funds to pay that. It's just, wow. I just got fined $21,000 for making a hit that was clean. It was a clean hit.
It was perfect. It was text. And see, I have problems with all across the board. If the guy hit helmet to helmet, whatever. It's the rules. It's the rules. It's stupid, but it sucks. But whatever. But you're trying to change the way football is played, not even just tackling. Everybody who knows anything about football knows you want offensive players to work to the inside of the defense. You want to force them inside. It's exactly what happened. The receiver got forced inside. Bostic, you're going to get killed by the guy coming from the middle if you're going inside on a route like that. That's just going to happen if the linebacker plays it right. So you're basically telling players who've learned their entire life to smack people coming across the middle to totally change their style of play. And I don't understand the head down thing. So what do you want everyone to come in there with their heads up and snap their necks back and just end their life? Is that the next step that's coming? You're not going to be able to have, is that the rule now where you're not allowed to have your head down at all? I mean, that's ridiculous. It's stupid. It's not football at all. I turned into total meatball mode this morning when I woke up and saw this. I mean, I don't get it. It's football.
Everything about it is completely asinine, especially when you look at the hypocrisy of it all, because here's the NFL, who they're now the knights in shining army riding in for the safety of the players in their league. They're here to make everything safer so that people don't have to deal with the everlasting effect of head trauma after football. They're going to clean this game up. They're going to make it safer. They're going to make concussions not an issue in football anymore. What do you do when you go on their website and you see John Bostic's hit touted as a spectacular play on there, and they're talking about how phenomenal of a hit that it was, and they're using that to generate traffic on their website, generate revenue for their league, and then you're going to turn around and fine this guy $21,000? It'd be one thing if this was a dirty hit, if this was something where he did go helmet to helmet, even if it wasn't intentional. There's wording in the rules that kind of allow for that type of thing. Here's the thing. You've lowered the target area. I understand the point of that. You're trying to take out the idea of helmet-to-helmet contact. I understand the point of that. He was in the proper target area. He was below the shoulder level like everyone has been asked to do. That's been a major point of emphasis in the NFL. That's what he's supposed to do. He got his shoulder out in front of the ball carrier, like everybody teaches you in Pee Wee football. You want to get your shoulder out in front of where the guy's running, and he wound up hitting him. Yes, his head was down, but he did not square him up in terms of being directly in his chest where he would have ridden up into his face mask like that Jadeveon Clowney hit that had happened that people are saying would have been a penalty in the new structure of football.
Oh, he killed that guy.
But what Bostic did wasn't that. He got himself off to a side, which is what you are supposed to do. That's a textbook form tackle. The violence of it is really the only aspect of it that even makes this questionable in any way, shape, or form. And it's not a hit that happened and looked as nasty as it was because his helmet was leading and he was trying to do something to either take this guy out. No, it was a form tackle where he just squared the guy up and absolutely demolished him, and it was clean in every way, shape, or form. So to actually sit there and see them say that it was dirty and fine a kid $21,000 for a play that wasn't even penalized. Here's the thing, you're fining this kid $21,000 for a play that wasn't penalized. That's the equivalent of going to and I said this in my column, it's like going to a perfectly built house and looking at the carpenter dead in the face and say, yeah, but you're getting a little bit too aggressive with the nails.
Exactly. That's spot on. Both your analogies, the speeding ticket for the fine and that, I mean, it's 100% correct. I don't get it. I think Bostic's going to be fine out of this. But you run the risk of, okay, just played his second game. He's already got a crazy fine for a clean hit. Now I don't think he's going to get in his head. I don't think he's a weak-minded person by any means. I think he's just going to keep playing the way he plays, which was perfectly clean. But you run that risk of, is he going to alter? Oh man, I don't want to get that 20. That's a game check almost. So you run that risk of, is he going to play different? Is he going to be less aggressive next time the guy's coming across the middle? And then which would result in him getting killed, or is he going to go low and blow out some guy's ACL just like Dustin Keller just happened? So I mean, that's another thing. I mean, this is we could probably rant on the NFL rules from here till the end of the season.
Well, no,
but
it's a valid point.
You'd rather people blow their ACLs?
No, I mean, it's a valid point in terms of, no, you don't necessarily think that John Bostic's going to do that, but he's made his entire career in football up to this point on being that type of a football player, and now he goes out there in his second game and he makes a hit that he's been making throughout the course of his entire career. Go look up a Florida highlight video and type in John Bostic. You're going to find a whole bunch of short clips of John Bostic absolutely annihilating people in the SEC, out of the SEC, everywhere he's played. That's been the type of football player he is. And now you're kind of putting him and casting him in this light where, okay, if I get fined $21,000 for this hit where I didn't even get my helmet anywhere near the other guy's helmet, what's going to happen when I'm not able to get out of the way of someone's helmet? Do I have to pull up at that point? Do I have to worry about any of that above-the-shoulder contact because I'm going to be labeled as one of these guys who is out there blowing people up constantly and winding up with $21,000 fines on a bi-weekly basis? Even for a guy who's rich, that gets expensive real fast. Just ask James Harrison.
You do it 5 times, you just spent $100,000. I mean, that's not chump change to anybody out there, unless they're Donald Trump or something. I mean, come on.
Well, and as a repeat offender, you run the risk of being suspended and losing game checks, and that's more money out of your pocket.
It's only going to get a bigger fine each time. And now you have John Bostic in his second game, has never played a regular season game in his life, and he's already on the NFL list of rule breakers, essentially. Yeah. So now, if it happens in week 1, it's going to be even more. So he's going to be paying 2 game checks. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, how much do they get paid in preseason? Do they get anything for training camp and everything?
They're subsisting on probably a stipend and their signing bonuses, but they will get their base salary is spread out over the course of the regular season.
So you're basically taking the kid who doesn't make any money at the moment besides the signing bonus, which I think he had like $1 million signing bonus, something in the wrong. But still, by the time he buys a house in Chicago and all, I mean, that stuff adds up. I mean, he's not going to come out and build some extravagant mansion yet, but still, it's just stupid. Everyone's so quick to go, at NFL Commission on Twitter, I'm guilty of this. You're an idiot. You suck. Yes, well, that's true. He's the more so the spokesperson for what the owners are telling him to do. So, I mean, as bad as Goodell is, it's still the owners too. I don't know how all that works, or whether he has any sort of say, but it's not all Roger Goodell. So don't put all the blame on him. But this, I mean, you look at a guy like Dustin Keller, who is, his career could be over because he blew his knee out completely. So you'd rather, I mean, a concussion suck, but if you get a concussion, you can come back in 2 weeks. You can come back in a week sometimes. You tear your ACL, you're done for the season. you're screwed. Your career's over. I just don't get it. So if they're gonna, like Matt Forte said about going to the knees, or when they first made the new rule where running backs can't lead with their heads or whatever, you're basically, if you get rid of the low below the the knee hits, you're basically creating a baseball strike zone, if not smaller, to be the target area where you're supposed to hit people. Which, if they actually were to actually make the rules fair, which it will suck even more, but we'd have less ACLs blown. So I mean, you're kind of creating this situation where the defensive player, the offensive player is going to want those kind of hits gone too, and then you're just going to have this thing where, I mean, you might as well just put flags on them because it's going to be about the same zone.
I understand the need for safety entirely, and
Agreed.
so some of these rules changes is something that I get, and we've had conversations similar to this extent. I get the idea that you want to make the game of football safer. However, at the same time, one of the major things that makes us all fans of football is the violence of it and the aspect of it. And
I want to see people get killed, not literally, but you know what I mean.
At some point, you have to be able to differentiate between the two, between saying, okay, we're doing this for the long-term safety of the game, and we're doing this to cover our asses right now because we don't want mounting legal things and people saying that we never did anything to help them. At some point, you've either got to draw a line and say, okay, this is as safe as we can make it. There's still dangers. We understand that, but this is going to be the way we interpret this game forever, throughout the rest of the course of history, and people are going to either understand the risks and continue to play at their own risk, or not play, and that's going to be their choice, and that's going to be a decision that the league has to make at some point. Otherwise, you do spiral very quickly into being a league that winds up being not the type of football that people have gotten into it for. The reason why we get into football is because there's a side of everyone's mind that's dark and just barbaric, and we like the idea of seeing people run around out there and just inflict physical pain on each other for our own amusement. And we can say, oh, it's not that barbaric and it's not just for our amusement because they're paid very, very well and they understand the risks that are involved. But at the same time, that's not really something we care about. We just want to see them running around out there waxing each other. And if we don't get that, I don't know how long football winds up being the sport that it is right now, the sport that is just absolute head and shoulders more popular above every other sport that we have in this country, because that's something that we're interested in. You notice we don't watch a lot of rugby in this country. No. We don't watch a lot of other machinations of physical sports because it's not football. We want to see these high-impact collisions, and like I said, I understand the need to make it safe. I get why you don't want people out there smacking each other's heads together, but at some point when you have a hit that is about as close to perfect as you can possibly get it, and you wind up going out and fining him because of one minor detail in the rules that says that, oh, hey, his head wasn't tilted at quite the right angle, it was a little bit too far down, and his helmet was what first made contact with the guy's body.
You can't control
and we
that.
Don't want that. That's too difficult for a player to be able to do and adjust to in a situational scenario.
In a bang-bang game.
And at that point, it becomes like, if you really are that concerned with people using their helmets as weapons, take the helmets off of them.
Or create something, people have talked about the idea of bringing a leather helmet back. It doesn't necessarily have to be leather, but it's something along the lines, something you can put a logo on, blah, 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 that kind of deal. You mentioned football kind of falling out of the main spotlight 10 years down the road, maybe 15, 20 years down the road, if it keeps going this way, because youth football at this rate is slowly going to go away. I think for the most part. I mean, down in Texas and the southern part of Florida, I doubt it's really ever going to go away. But and if it does, private leagues are going to open up. There is always going to be some sort of football going, so we'll always have it. But you got these athletes who, a lot of football players like wide receivers also play basketball or have played basketball in their lives. You're going to see, I think, a switch over the next 10 to 20 years if the league keeps going the way it's going, and I don't think it's going to turn around at all. I don't think it's something that you're going to go, oh, no, everyone can kill each other again. Like I said, I understand the safety thing, but this sport's kind of going to have the boxing thing. All the great athletes that were in boxing don't necessarily do boxing anymore.
Exactly, and that's a very good comparison to make, because obviously you have to make it safer to kind of prevent that from happening. But at the same time, if you don't have the physicality to it, you don't wind up having as many people watching. It doesn't become as illustrious to your viewers, which means you're not able to pay your players as much. And then that's where the balancing act comes in, because as long as football can be a very lucrative thing for somebody to do, there will be people who are out there willing to risk their bodies to do it. However, as you take the violence away, that's where you start to see the pendulum shift, because now, well, it's not as illustrious, it's not as popular anymore. We don't pay our players anymore. And now you're not going to be able to find as many players who are willing to risk it. And so somewhere you have to find that middle ground where football still remains incredibly popular and it's a little bit safer, so now you have people a little bit more willing to risk it and continue to play football. It's this pendulum act, and it swings back and forth. And either way you do it, if you don't think about safety whatsoever, it swings the pendulum in one way, and then you never have anybody who's willing to play because it's too dangerous. But if you don't keep it entertaining and people watching, you don't have enough money to make it lucrative enough to have people playing. So either way, you're running the risk of really alienating your fan base and alienating the people who are going to be out there playing. And they have to find this middle ground and kind of settle in. They can't just make the game safe and put everybody in bubbles. It's not going to work that way. And at the same time, they can't do nothing and let people go out there killing themselves. It's a difficult situation. I know it's hard for the NFL, which is why I don't necessarily come down on the NFL is terrible side of that debate. But at the same time, you have a hit like this that is about as close to that middle ground as you could possibly hope for. Why are you finding that and not rewarding that? That should be something you put on your website and say, hey, look at this hit. This was spectacular, because that's what you should be marketing.
That hit should go around
your league to be.
A hit should go around to every team after that hit was recorded. It should have gone around. This is exactly the kind of hit we want. That should have been the leading example for the new NFL. But it's not, because he didn't pull the flag. He pulled the flag too hard and the guy fell down. I mean, that's what it's coming down to. I always make that comparison. And I sometimes come down a little too much of this NFL, they're done. This guy is, I can't take it. I'm going to basketball where they don't even play team sports. I mean, I get meatball mode for a while, and then I come out of it. But it's so frustrating. I mean, I'm someone who I mentioned boxing. I love boxing. I've seen a million fights. Look at where boxing was until, it started to go away when Tyson was at his peak, but it was still great back then. And now it's just there's the Klitschko's and there's Mayweather, but he's overrated, and a couple other guys, and that's pretty much it. And it's such a good sport. I love boxing, but no one wants to do it, and that's where it's going to get to. I mean, there's always, like you said, there's always going to be people who are willing to just put their lives on the line for entertainment, essentially. It's going to get to a point where, I mean, this league's slowly going to drift away. And someone today on Twitter had mentioned, they're like, oh, everyone's saying the Doomsday NFL posts are back, and it's not going to happen, but it's going to be a gradual thing. It's not going to just, next season out, not everyone's just going to switch to basketball or go watch hockey. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's going to be kind of the next generation won't really watch football because there's nothing fun about it. We'll still kind of watch it as it starts to die. But then it also makes me wonder, can another league open up? If someone were to come along and try to start another league and convince all these guys, hey, you can play football the real way. But then at that point, you have all these players conditioned to the new style of the NFL. Maybe they can't go back and play it that way. So, I mean, it's a really weird situation right now with the NFL because it is the most dominant thing in America as far as entertainment goes. So, it leaves all of us diehard football fans and anyone involved with the NFL in this weird spot.
I think it leaves everybody in a weird spot. Like I said, the NFL's in a weird spot, players are in a weird spot, fans are in a weird spot.
And ESPN will get hurt.
Things are changing. However, at the same time, it's just, like I said, you have to find this middle ground to where you can at least say, okay, we've done what we can to make this game safe. However, we're going to keep it to a point where it remains entertaining. Otherwise, and nobody's saying that the NFL is going away anytime soon, but you could be looking 30, 40, 50 years down the road and looking at football the way we look at baseball now.
Or boxing.
60 years ago, boxing too. 60 years ago, boxing and baseball were the two most popular sports in America. And now, because of the popularity of football kind of rising above that, and because the dangerousness of boxing taking everything down, baseball just kind of stayed at a general consistent level, and now you have the steroid stuff that's plummeting it back down towards earth, some of the strikes of the 80s, and things are cyclical like that. So if you give people reasons to not watch, eventually they will go away. So the difficulty of that entire proposition for the NFL is just finding a way to balance everything. And like I said, I know it's difficult. I don't expect them to figure it all out in one instance, but the John Bostic hit to me is one of those things where you should look at and say, you know what, that's right at the limit of exactly what we want to do. It's not quite dangerous enough to the point where someone's going to be seriously, seriously hurt by this, and it's damn entertaining, and that's exactly what we want our fans to see. That should be a hit that they embrace, not a hit that they go out and find some rookie $21,000 for.
Agreed completely. And you know, I mentioned about the athletes not playing football, and you know, some of those guys who play basketball will be going to play basketball, like a Julius Peppers or maybe a Brandon. You know, some of the guys who've played. And if I'm the National Basketball Association, I mean, I'm sitting there going, "This is great." You know, if the NFL 10 years starts to go downhill and these athletes are starting to come over and the NBA is getting more of this crazy athletic talent that goes into the NFL, the basketball is going to be the next thing. I mean, it's not close, but it's the second biggest out of everything.
Yeah.
So
basketball is positioned well. I mean,
very well.
They're at a juncture of their sport where they're as popular as they've ever been. They're growing internationally.
So many superstars.
And so many people are worried about what the long-term health effects of football are going to be, to where, yeah, they are definitely positioned well to where if football does wind up going on the decline, they're going to scoop up some of these superior athletes and wind up being our nation and potentially even the world's favorite sport. That's the thing with basketball that really intrigues me, is the global appeal.
It's huge.
You look at the way soccer is, and obviously soccer is so big everywhere else in the world, but it can't take a foothold here in America, which kind of makes it a little bit less interesting, obviously just in America, but on a grand scale, whereas basketball is rising rapidly in popularity across the rest of the world, and it's the number 2 sport in America and rising at this point. It has the potential to be a very, very profitable endeavor and a sport that people are certainly going to be enthused about going forward if things continue to go the way they're going.
It's going to be. I'm not excited for the next 20 years. That means I'm going to get older, and then that means like everything's just going downhill. But I'm curious. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm curious to see what happens. Like if I could look forward in the future right now, I'd do it just to see. I'm just curious because my vision of it is that basketball is going to be the next football. I don't think it'll ever. Maybe it will reach that same height that football has reached, but.
I mean, I think it could.
I think the possibility's there. I mean, I don't know if it would reach quite, because it's not a barbaric game, and everybody just wants to get drunk and slam nachos down their throat to clog your arteries as soon as they go in. I mean, everyone wants that. Maybe all these weirdos are going to leak over to. Actually, no, those guys can just go to hockey. Hockey will be better off. That's a sport that could benefit a little bit too, but basketball is going to be the one that just takes over completely.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happened. Obviously, the Bostic hit is something that makes these types of conversations possible. And like you said, people talking about the doomsday tweets in the NFL or about the NFL. You know what? If you do the right thing and kind of use just a little bit of judgment, not everything has to be black and white. It doesn't have to be, oh, John Bostic's head was down. That's a fine. You should be able to kind of differentiate between things that are blatant violations of the rules and that are dangerous and unsafe versus a hit that looks violent and had one technical flaw to it, which really wasn't that big of a flaw because it's a new rule in the NFL and people are still trying to figure out exactly how it applies to practical football. But, I mean, if you give yourself the opportunity to kind of look at that objectively as opposed to subjectively and just say, or subjectively as opposed to objectively and just say, you know what? Yeah, there was maybe this one little thing wrong with it, but overall that's a pretty good, clean hit, and we're going to waive this. It wasn't penalized on the field. We're not going to fine him. We're not going to suspend him. We're just going to kind of applaud this as a good hit. Congratulations, good on you. Maybe put your head up next time, and we won't have to even have this conversation.
Exactly. Or it is preseason. The guy's a rookie. He's had a handful of tackles in his career so far in 2 preseason games. Why not use this as an example? Okay, hey, we changed the rules. We're not going to drop the hammer. This is almost what we want. If it's possible, get your head out of the way a little bit more. Which this should be a perfect legal hit. But if it's not going to be a perfect legal hit, specify it even more by using this as an example without fining anybody, because no one really knows. I mean, you know what it is, but knowing it and trying to figure out how to do it without killing yourself or getting run over from not going full bore at the guy, that's 2 totally different things. But it's overly frustrating, and everybody across the board, including people on ESPN, ESPN that was in the highlight reel for the week was the Bostic hit. So, like you said, NFL.com had it on their main site, but It's an interesting. We're approaching 40 minutes, by the way, so we're good going good on our 45-minute mark.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the two big things that were to talk about over the course of the week
We got
was
a
the
couple more
game
hits,
itself and this actual Bostic thing. I mean, we both watched the game a couple of times. Unfortunately, you were smart enough to put it on mute and not listen to Chris Berman. I wasn't, so I sat through there and listened to that complete and utter nonsense. I just, whatever you do, and that's why you mentioned basketball earlier. I should just become a diehard basketball fan because it's the only sport that you can find on ESPN where you don't have to worry about Chris Berman creeping on your radar sometimes.
I didn't think about that.
Sit there and I watch golf, and then next thing you know, Chris Berman.
He doesn't ever need to be at the U.S. Open.
God. Baseball, I'm watching the Home Run Derby, and I got to listen to that. Back. Utter Applebee's bull, you know what? And I mean, it's just completely ridiculous. I cannot stand him to have to sit through there and listen to him and not be smart enough to mute him as I watched it 2-3 times was completely insufferable.
You know what? I'm going to say this about him for this game. Usually, as soon as the game starts, it's the monsters of the Midway, down Lake Michigan. He says all the cliche Dick Butkus. He names every great player in the Bears history, and it's all this meatballish stuff. He was actually reeled back a little bit. Surprisingly, he's still annoying. He's still Chris Berman. You have, McClellan being mistaken, or Wooten being mistaken for McClellan. And he said the name wrong, and it's just... for Dilfer did at least. I mean, that crew. I don't ever. If that crew's ever the Monday Night Crew, I'm just gonna.
He gave Donald Butler like a 45-second nickname where he talked about Donald the Butler did it, and then he named like the entire stupid game. Like you just sit there and talk about he did it with a candlestick in the laboratory.
So
and like
bad.
Shut your mouth. The only thing that saved us from it was him going to commercial. It's just. Maybe there's a family of 4 fat people sitting at Applebee's who are entertained by some of this stuff, but for God's sake, get it off my television. Please.
I mean, it's so... when he's in the studio, it's not as bad. When he's out of the studio, it's just kind of like, all right, you're out of your environment, guy. Go away. Please, stop. Just stop it. Just disappear. You're an asshole off the camera, so just go away.
It's because he's 30-plus years at ESPN and he has all this pull, and so he can sit there and put stuff in his contract and say, hey, I want to do this many this things every year, this many this things every year. And
I think he demanded it, too, the Monday night thing.
He randomly pops up everywhere that you watch, and you just don't want to see him, and it drives me absolutely insane. I absolutely despise the man, and I can't have him on my television anymore.
And him teaming up with Dilfer for me. I mean, Dilfer has gotten better, like we were talking before we got on here. Dilfer's gotten better. I don't hate him like I used to. He still bugs me at times, but he knows the game. He watches a lot of film. He's got great insight if you can see through some of the crazy the stuff he says. But Dilfer's getting better. I think Dilfer has potential to be a good announcer down the road. His voice bugs me, but Berman, all hope is lost. All he's got to be is like whoop. That's all he's got now. That's the only thing he has, and that still makes me laugh a little bit at times. That's it. I admit, it's my guilty pleasure. Occasionally, he makes me laugh with that if it's perfect. But the rest of it, he can go away.
I'm a bit of a masochist, so when Berman does come on, I immediately fire up. Like my fingers start getting jittery, and I get on Twitter, and I'm just ready to rattle off jokes at a moment's notice. So there is that part that's enjoyable to it, but. That, like I said, that's all based on me being able to make fun of him. Like, there's nothing actually enjoyable about what he's doing on television, so why has he not been put out to pasture yet?
See, and now I'll riddle you this. Who would you rather listen to, Chris Berman or Joe Buck? Because for me, Joe Buck is just unlistened to, at least when they play the Packers. Although I will give Joe Buck this 2 years ago during, I guess, the Packers Super Bowl, I think. It was around that time. I was going back and forth with Joe Buck on Twitter, and he got me good. I don't remember what it was, and I wouldn't repeat it on here anyway, even if it was. But I said something to him, and he got me really, really good back on Twitter, because he actually comes back at everybody who talks shit to him. And ever since then, I've gained this weird respect for Joe Buck. I don't know why. I still can't stand him. I don't ever want to hear him. I pause the game, match the DVR up with Jeff Joniak and Tom Thayer, and that's how I watch games now. But, I mean, I would rather take Joe Buck over Berman, and that's saying something for me.
Yeah, Buck's bad, but he's got that smarmy attitude, and you can notice it even beyond just like what his actual announcing skills are, and that's something that always entertains me. Anyone who takes that stance and says pretty much just F the haters and goes out there and just doesn't really care what anybody thinks and does his own thing.
I can respect
at least
that.
have respect for that, whereas Berman is just I mean, it's at the point where he's damn near geriatric, and he's out there just muttering about stuff for 3 hours, and I don't have the patience for that anymore.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. And it really, Berman's mystique, unless you're like 12 years old, is really worn off. I know my stepdad can't stand him. Whenever I watch games with him, whenever we watch ESPN, he switches over to NFL Network or any. I mean, I do the same thing. As soon as I see him get on there, and I don't really have any interest in the ESPN crew overall. I mean, Ditka's on there. All he does is pick the Bears. Keyshawn and Chris Carter has some decent things to say, but overall, that whole crew, I switched to NFL Network. You actually have some really insightful people over there who are, in my opinion, more intelligent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even have anything else to invest in the Berman thing. I don't like him. I don't like him. But moving forward, quick hitters.
We got 46 minutes now, but yeah, I wanted to. Do you have any? What's your quick hits before we get out of here?
The only thing I got quickly is obviously we spent a little bit of time on Matt Blanchard. Sad to see him get injured because sucks. I do like what he brings to the football team. I like what he brings as a developmental prospect. Obviously, the Bears going to move on at this point. I don't think that necessarily means they're done with Matt Blanchard entirely. This is an injury he'll recover from. It's just a left-hand injury. He's still throwing and stuff, so he's going to get the opportunity to rehab a little bit and continue to work with this football team.
I think he'll be around.
They bring in a couple of quarterbacks in the meantime to kind of spell that, and that'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out with them technically having 5 quarterbacks on their roster now, if you count Matt Blanchard still. But, yeah, that'll be interesting. That's really the only other thing that I put a lot of stock into from that game.
See, one thing that it kind of bugs me, but I guess I expected it. It's the whole Shea McClellan thing. This guy, there's no doubt about it, he's as fast as anybody in the game when it comes to doing what he does. He's very Mark Anderson-ish. I think he could have that effect if he can figure out what his go-to move is going to be. But as soon as someone gets his hands on him, he's swallowed up and done. I mean, he's like a feather. He's so small, but he's so quick. I still don't see first-round value in this guy right now. I mean, he's got the speed. He's got the potential to be a good pass rusher. But if someone gets his hand on him, it's over.
No, I agree, and I think you can make a career out of being what Shea McClellan is right now. However, that's not what you're looking for from a guy that you take with a first-round draft pick.
Exactly.
So that's obviously where the Bears kind of have this philosophical break, because they look at him as this guy who can do all these things, and what we've seen so far is really just indicative of a guy who can only do a few things.
You're going to run at him every time he's in the game if he's in the game on a non-passing down. I mean, you run away from size, you run at speed. It's the number one rule in for playing offense if you're trying to run the ball. So it's disappointing. If he was a second, if he was a third round pick or later, I'd say, you know what, whatever. If he contributes on third down and he gets 8 sacks a year or something, that's great. Or he gets over 5 sacks, I'm all right with that. But the fact that he didn't. Supposedly he's lighter or he looks smaller. I forget what it was. I think he said he was lighter coming into the season. That's bad. That's just bad news for this guy. He had to get bigger. He had to get stronger. That competition between Corey Wooten and him wasn't a competition. If it was a blowout. Because Corey Wooten, my other point, it's not really anything. It's not groundbreaking news. I think it's finally going to happen. Corey Wooten, if healthy, is going to make stake his claim that he is one of the better pass rushers in the game. I just have this feeling he's going to break out. Every time, he just looks like a primetime player right now. He's got so much confidence.
Yeah, I came out and planted my flag pretty early on the Corey Wooten field, so I'm right there with you on that. And going back to McClellan even a little bit, I think at this stage, his best chance to actually be a significant football player at any stage in his career is to be a jack linebacker in a 3-4 defense, and that's something that he's not going to have the opportunity to do here. So, yeah, I mean, if he gives you the situational stuff, you say, okay, at least we're getting something out of him. But you're right, it's definitely not first-round value at this point, and hopefully he turns it around, but at this point I haven't seen anything to indicate that he will.
Well, that pretty much sums everything up for me overall. We touched on everything. We got over the Bostic stuff, and that was carried the majority of this show, which is good talk. It's what everyone's talking about. It's the hot topic, so perfect timing on doing a podcast.
I got 750-something words on it on Chicago Bears Huddle today, so you kind of expected me to have a little bit of extra motivation to pop this one. And if you guys haven't read my column, be sure to go to Chicago Bears Huddle. It's mostly on the Bostic stuff, and using a couple of the same analogies that I already stole and used on the podcast. I'm not very creative, guys. I can't come up with new stuff for you. So if I already wrote it down somewhere, you're probably just going to get that spewed at you.
And I pretty much just read off my column to remember everything since it's been almost a week. So if my column's still floating on the first page somewhere from Friday about my review of the game. So if you're curious about some other things I said, go check that out. We're both up there, and we're always writing. So
follow us on Twitter. I'm at Ryan_Wooden.
I'm at Darren Doxey, so that's real simple. Follow us and get us over. You're finally over the 600 follower hump, aren't you?
Yep, I'm up there. Darren,
I can't get over it.
Go. Hey, I've been steaming. I've been going. Like, I've been putting them on lately. I think with all the various jobs that I have, I get attention from a lot of different fan bases, and it just kind of all funnels together for me. Because I know for a while there you were sitting up over 500, and I was still back around.
Yeah, when I first met you, you were like 300, I think, somewhere around there, and you just you said something about 600, and I was like, damn, Ryan skyrocketed really quick. I've been at 540 for like probably 6 months now, maybe a couple months now, but it's rough. I always get 100 every football season, so I figure by the time the NFL's over, I should have 1,000. Yeah, by the time the league's done and buried, I'll have 1,000.
I would love to have 1,000 before like the end of this calendar year. I think with all the football stuff I do, I'll have an opportunity for it.
We just got to convince Adam's followers to follow us and steal them from
1,000 that's the threshold for Twitter famous, right?
I think so. That means like Twitter verified.
Yeah. And when I get that blue check mark, and it's a shame to say because it's such a vain thing, but I'm going to go out and celebrate so hard when and if I ever get a blue check mark next to my name, because it's just, like I said, it's entirely vain. It's really kind of arbitrary in the grand scheme of life, but it's, for a person who writes and recognition is kind of a big deal. Having a blue check mark next to your name is about as big of a thing that you can do as opposed to like winning some sort of an award.
It's like getting signed to Atlantic Records as a rock band in the 70s. That's what that's like to me. Getting that check mark and like a couple thousand followers, that's huge. I don't think it's ever going to happen for me. I think I'm stuck. It's never going to happen, but that blue check mark means everything. It really does. It truly does. And maybe we'll get there one day. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll, who knows? But
it's funny because someday I hope for it. But I mean, I feel like where I'm at currently, Twitter went on this rash where they went and just kind of did blue check marks for a bunch of like writers who are somewhat prominent, but not like that well known. Guys who had like 4,000 followers, 5,000 followers. So I was like, well, hell, maybe I can get to there.
Yeah, I said the same thing. I remember when that was happening. I'm looking around. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, everyone's getting verified. I might be able to get verified.
Some of these guys are my friends, people I know, people I work with. And I'm like, hey, I mean, I'm young. I'm in my early 20s. I've got an opportunity to do this over the course of the next few years and maybe get one of those esteemed blue check marks.
My goal for anyone who's listening, I mean, the handful of listeners we probably get, I think we get a couple hundred listeners every week or so. But if you couple hundred of people would follow us, by the time we do 10 more podcasts, we could have like 1,600 followers a person. So that would be pretty cool. But I know it's not going to happen because everyone's too lazy to go to Twitter and type in, twitter.com/Darren Doxey or /Ryan_Wooden. So whatever. But that's our Twitter rant. We just totally went on a tangent. But that's good. It's good. It sucks. I want more followers, but Adam's up there probably like 2,000 now, maybe more. Who knows? But
like 3,500.
Is he 3,500 now? I don't keep
close to it.
Wow.
Damn him.
I despise you.
That's what he gets. This is our punishment for him going up and having 7 times more followers than we have.
Yeah.
We go 10 minutes over what we decided we were going to do on our podcast.
You know what? And the more followers he gets, the longer we're going over it. Talking about nothing sports related.
Exactly.
Or I'll start talking NBA. And, another thing I was going to comment.
Oh, no.
It's nothing about the game, but about the blue check mark. And you said you're going to go out and celebrate. I'm going to go out and celebrate like Patrick Kane. I'm going to party until the next afternoon. Like the Stanley Cup. I'm going to walk around with like a picture of the blue check mark by my name, and that's going to be like my Stanley Cup. I'm going to be drinking out of it, everything.
I've made at certain points in my life when I was in my earlier 20s, I made Patrick Kane's party efforts look pretty pedantic. So if I get a blue check mark, I'm going back down into my 21-year-old phase and really kind of tying one off and celebrating the right way.
It's the only way to do it when you get the blue check mark. But there's only one thing to do, my friend, when you get the blue check mark. Then that's party. Party like Ditka. Party like Kaner. Kaner. All right, I think we've had enough nonsense for this show for Adam to edit. But thanks for everyone who listens. I really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter. Keep following the blog, and we'll keep doing this as long as you keep listening. So I guess take it easy. We'll see you guys some other time.
Have a good night.